Jackson Rivers had grease under his fingernails and plasma burns on his forearms when fate decided to rewrite his life. He was elbow-deep in the hyperdrive core of an aging Martian cargo hauler, muttering curses at a faulty coolant regulator when shadows fell across the open hatch of the maintenance bay. He squinted up, blinking sweat from his eyes, and froze. 3 Imperial dreadnoughts hovered above the Mars scrapyard, their silver hulls gleaming like knives against the rust-colored sky. A single drone descended from the nearest ship, its polished shell humming softly. It stopped at eye level, casting a clinical blue glow over Jackson's sweat-streaked face. "Are you Jackson Rivers, son of Elena Rivers, granddaughter of Marcus Rivers?" the drone asked. Its voice was crisp, mechanical, utterly indifferent. Jackson stared, still holding a hydrospanner. "Yeah, that's me. Why?" The drone extended a small holographic seal, the imperial crest of the Galactic Throne. "By decree of the Succession Protocol, you are hereby summoned to Centrolis Prime to claim your birthright as the last living heir of the House of Rivers." Jackson barked a laugh, sharp, incredulous. "Wait, what? You think I'm, what, royalty?" The drone didn't flinch. "Your great-grandfather Marcus Rivers was the 3rd son of Emperor Hadrian Rivers. Exiled after refusing a political marriage, with the recent death of Emperor Valen Rivers and the loss of all other heirs in the Kepler Rebellion, succession traces to you." The words hit him like a meteor. Jackson Rivers, who lived in a converted shipping container, ate nutrient paste for dinner, and didn't own a pair of shoes without holes, was being told he was an emperor. "I think you've got the wrong guy," he said, backing toward his open toolkit. "I fix engines. I don't even own a suit." "DNA confirmation required," the drone responded. A small silver needle slid out from its base. "Whoa, wait." Too late. The needle pricked his thumb. A drop of blood vanished into the drone's core. The imperial crest flared bright blue. "Genetic match confirmed. Jackson Rivers, you are the legitimate heir to the Galactic Throne. You will be transported immediately to Centrolis Prime for coronation and additional arrangements." "Additional what arrangements?" Jackson asked warily. The drone's optical sensors pulsed. "The late Emperor's political marriage bonds transfer with the crown. You have inherited not only the throne, but also the Emperor's battlemate, High Commander Thesara Vex of the Zarathi Dominion." Jackson's brain short-circuited. "I inherited a what?" "A wife, Your Imperial Majesty, though she is currently displeased with this development." 3 hours later, Jackson sat inside the white, sterile interior of an Imperial transport vessel, still wearing his oil-stained coveralls. His entire life now fit into a single duffel bag shoved beneath the seat. Out the window, Mars had become a reddish dot. He hadn't even had time to pack properly, let alone process the idea of being married to a terrifying alien warlord. "How displeased are we talking?" he asked the ship's AI weakly. "High Commander Thesara Vex has filed 17 formal protests, challenged the Succession Protocol in 3 galactic courts, and requested permission to duel you to the death." Jackson slumped in his seat, muttering, "Fantastic." "Correction," the AI added. "She has been denied the duel. For now." Through the viewport ahead, Centrolis Prime loomed, an impossibly vast world city of crystalline towers and floating bridges that shimmered like starlight. Somewhere down there, a battle-hardened alien woman awaited him. She was his political bride, and she wanted him dead. Jackson pressed his forehead to the cold glass and whispered to no one, "I wonder if it's too late to fake my own death." The throne room of Centrolis Prime was less a room and more a cathedral of power. Soaring columns of liquid crystal rose like frozen lightning, and walls shimmered with shifting patterns of aurora. Above them, the ceiling opened to the stars themselves, vast, cold, and uncaring. And in the center of it all, wearing grease-streaked coveralls and clutching a nervous sort of courage, stood Jackson Rivers. He felt like a blemish on a masterpiece. He wasn't alone. 20 feet away stood High Commander Thesara Vex, and she was terrifying. 8 feet of precision-forged muscle and scarred nobility, she radiated power like a star on the verge of collapse. Her skin was the color of polished obsidian, her silver tribal markings catching the ambient light like coded warnings. Golden eyes, hot, molten, unblinking, watched him with the same intensity a predator reserved for a mouse it hadn't decided whether to eat. She wore black battle armor that looked like it had never lost a fight. A plasma sword hung at her hip, pulsing with restrained energy. When she spoke, her voice cracked like thunder over mountains. "This is the whelp they expect me to serve?" Jackson flushed. "Nice to meet you, too." "I did not address you, child." Before Jackson could retort, a geometric shimmer flared in the space between them. The palace, AI-AXIS- materialized as a rotating lattice of shifting light. "High Commander Vex, Emperor Rivers." "I'm not an emperor," Jackson cut in. "I'm a mechanic who got DNA scammed into a cosmic bureaucratic nightmare." Thesara's lips curled. Not quite a smile. "At least you're honest about your inadequacy." Jackson stepped forward, even though his legs screamed retreat. "Look, I don't want this. Any of it. Can't we just cancel the whole marriage thing and go our separate ways?" The laugh she gave was sharp as shattered glass. "You think I haven't tried? I filed 17 appeals, challenged the succession law in every court from here to the Andromeda sector. The law is ironclad." "Indeed," AXIS confirmed. "Per Imperial protocol, the marriage bond cannot be dissolved for one galactic cycle, approximately 1 Earth year. The High Commander is legally bound to serve as regent consort until that time expires." "Serve?" Thesara's voice could have melted steel. "I am High Commander of the Zarathi Dominion. I have conquered 12 systems. I have personally slain 3 would-be usurpers. I do not serve." "You serve the Empire," Axis replied smoothly. "As per the treaty your people signed 40 cycles ago." Jackson glanced between them. "So, we're stuck. You don't want to be here. I sure as hell didn't ask for this. And yet here we are." Thesara began circling him, her gaze a blade that stripped away whatever scraps of dignity he had left. "Stuck implies temporary inconvenience," she said. "What I am experiencing is cosmic injustice." AXIS flickered. "Your quarters have been prepared. Adjacent suites in the Imperial Wing. Your first state dinner is tomorrow evening." "Adjacent?" Thesara turned, her eyes narrowed. "I will not be caged near this child. The law requires the Imperial couple maintain reasonable proximity for security and diplomatic function." "I'm 18, Jackson muttered. "I'm not a child." She stopped circling, turned, stared. "You are a decade younger than me, untrained in combat, clueless in politics. You've never led an army or negotiated a treaty. You've never made a decision that affected more than your lunch order." Her words landed like slaps. "You are exactly what you appear to be, a boy in a man's shoes." Jackson's shoulders stiffened. "Maybe, but I'm also the one with the crown, whether you like it or not." For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Not approval, but maybe surprise. "Foolish," she murmured. "Suicidal, but spirited. Thanks, I think." "If I may," Axis interjected gently. "Your Imperial Majesty, you may wish to change clothes before the evening briefing." Jackson glanced down at his grease-stained coveralls and sighed. "Do I even have clothes?" "A wardrobe has been prepared. Though," Axis pulsed faintly. "High Commander Vex expressed preference for you to remain dressed as you are." Jackson frowned. "Why?" Thesara's lips curved into something predatory. "So the galaxy sees exactly what kind of emperor it has inherited. The wardrobe had clothes, all right. Too many, actually. Silks and synthetics. Military jackets with more metals than Jackson had teeth. Robes so ornate he felt like a kid dressing up in his grandmother's curtains. He chose the simplest suit he could find. Dark navy, no cape, no embroidery. He still felt like a fraud. The state dinner was exactly what he'd feared. Towering alien dignitaries, humans in full regalia, golden chandeliers that floated midair. And Jackson, the new emperor, awkward in too clean clothes, trying to remember not to scratch his neck. He spotted her before she saw him. Thesara. She stood at the far end of the hall, surrounded by generals and nobles who gave her the kind of wide berth reserved for apex predators. She wore full dress armor this time, ceremonial but still capable of snapping bones. Her silver tattoos caught the candlelight. Her face was unreadable. She hadn't spoken to him since the throne room. He wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a threat. The first challenge came in the form of Ambassador Yulin of the Delcari conglomerate, 12 feet tall, scaled, and very intent on exploiting a clause in the old trade agreements. Jackson had no idea what half the terms meant. He stumbled, bluffed, almost agreed to give Delcari access to the Empire's deep crystal mines, until a firm voice cut through the conversation. The Empire maintains strategic mineral reserves under sovereign protection. Any access must be approved through Defense Command and the Regency Council. Thesara. She stepped in, uninvited but controlled, standing at Jackson's side like a looming storm. She didn't look at him, just stared the ambassador down until the lizard-like being bowed and slithered away. There was a beat of silence. "Thanks," Jackson muttered. "I wasn't helping you," she replied coolly. "I was helping the Empire. You just happened to be attached to it." "Still," he said, "you didn't have to." She turned slightly, enough for him to catch a flash of golden eyes. "You looked like you were about to sign away half our mining rights. It was either step in or start preparing for economic collapse." "I'm not good at this," Jackson admitted. "You don't have to be. That's why you have advisors. I'm supposed to be emperor." "You are," she said simply. "Act like it." He blinked. "Is that encouragement?" "It's irritation," she corrected. "But if you're too useless, I'll have to clean up your messes personally. And I'm busy." He almost laughed. Almost. But later, as the dinner progressed and more ambassadors approached, Jackson noticed something strange. Thesara didn't leave. She didn't hover like a bodyguard, but she lingered, within range. When he stumbled on protocol, she'd cough once, just enough to signal. When someone tried to trap him in legal wording, she gave a sharp glance that sent them scrambling. She wasn't protecting him, but she wasn't letting him fall either. It was the first time he realized maybe he wasn't completely alone in this. That realization stayed with Jackson long after the state dinner ended. Even as he lay awake that night, back in his pristine suite with its crystal walls and silent halls, that strange awareness wouldn't leave him alone. She was watching, not hovering, not coddling, but noticing, just like he had been. Through the faintly glowing divider wall, Jackson saw her again, Thesara, in the private training chamber connected to her side of the suite, moving like a storm in slow motion, her blade carved through the air with elegance honed by war. Sweat glistened on her obsidian skin, catching the ambient light like stars across midnight. He told himself he wasn't spying. He was just curious. Then her voice cut through the glass. "Enjoying the view?" Jackson flinched upright. I heard the sound. "Zarathi require less sleep," she said, moving through another strike. "You humans need darkness and comfort. We train through silence." He sat up fully. "You don't have to stop." She paused just long enough to glance at him. "Everything I do now reflects on you. Your failure becomes my dishonor." "That's a lot of pressure," Jackson said. "I'm just trying not to fall on my face every day." She sheathed her blade in one fluid motion and stepped closer to the glass wall. The space between them glowed faintly, like starlight trapped in crystal. "Then stop stumbling. Rise." Jackson huffed a laugh. "I'll work on that. You make it sound so easy." "It's not, but weakness is contagious." He frowned. "You think I'm weak?" She studied him. "I think you've survived things no one prepared you for. That is not the same as strength." Jackson leaned against the divider wall. "Why do you even care?" A beat. Her expression didn't change, but her voice softened. "Because if you fall, I fall with you." That silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was real. Then she asked, "Do you know what my name means?" Jackson blinked. "Thesara?" "In Zarathi, it means Starfire Warrior. It's a title, not a gift." He smiled, letting the words roll around in his mouth. "Thesara Vex." Her expression twitched. That was unforgivable. Truly awful pronunciation. He laughed, honest and a little embarrassed. Maybe you could teach me. Why? So you can murder more of my language? So I can stop sounding like an idiot every time I say your name. That earned him a noise that might have been a laugh, might have been a snort. He counted it as a win either way. She leaned against the glass. For once, her posture wasn't guarded, just thoughtful. Your people fear us, she said. Zarathi. They see our strength and assume conquest. They don't see the centuries of survival behind it. The losses, the scars. He nodded. We're good at fearing what we don't understand. Another pause. Then her voice dropped lower. Valen never asked what it meant. That name hit the air like a weapon. Your late husband? Jackson asked gently. She gave a nod. Sharp, controlled. He wanted the warrior, not the woman. Did he love you? He loved having me beside him at parades. Jackson's jaw tightened. He never deserved you. She looked up, surprised maybe at the sincerity in his voice. Why do you watch me? She asked. He blinked. What? Through the glass. When I train. Jackson flushed. I didn't mean to. It's hard to miss. You're impossible not to notice. She tilted her head. You watch with curiosity, not fear. That is rare. Then quieter. I watch you too. That surprised him more than anything. When you study, when you ask questions no one expects an emperor to ask, when you stay up past midnight trying to understand a culture that's not yours. He swallowed. I'm trying, even if I don't belong here. You belong, she said quietly, not because of blood, but because you care more than the last 3 emperors combined. He looked up at her, heart catching in his throat. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me since I got here. Don't get used to it, she muttered. They stood in silence, the divider between them glowing like the edge of a dawn, not quite born. And for the first time since all this madness began, Jackson didn't feel like a mistake wearing a crown. He felt seen. Their conversation faded with the night, but the space between them had changed. Not much. Just enough. Jackson woke up the next morning more focused. He trained harder, asked better questions in council meetings, even started remembering the difference between the Altarian salute and the Zarathi one. Thesara didn't comment, but she stopped correcting him. That was progress. Then came the Festival of Unity, a celebration of the Empire's founding. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered on Centrolis Prime. Jackson had spent weeks preparing a speech about peace, balance, and a shared future. He never got to finish it. It started with a shimmer in the crowd, a flicker of movement where no one should be. Jackson noticed it a heartbeat before the chaos erupted. Blaster fire, screams, a flash of silver armor. Thesara was already moving before the guards did. Her sword snapped into her hand like it belonged there, and she cut through the crowd like a wave breaking steel. Get down! Jackson dove behind the podium as plasma bolts screamed overhead. His heart thundered against his ribs. He could see the assassins now, masked, fast, well-armed. There were too many. One of the guards fell. Another took a bolt through the shoulder. Thesara was holding ground, but even she couldn't be everywhere. Then he saw it. A thermal grenade rolled to a stop 10 feet away, blinking red. Too close. Way too close. Time stuttered. No one else saw it. No one else was close enough. Jackson moved. He didn't think. Didn't weigh his odds. He just ran, grabbed the grenade, and hurled it toward the plaza fountain. He dove a split second before it exploded. The world turned white. Then nothing. He came to with ringing ears and blurry vision. Something warm dripped down his neck. Everything ached. Jackson! Thesara's voice, fierce, sharp, scared. She was kneeling beside him, hands running over his face, chest, checking for damage. Answer me! Are you— Damn it! Jack! I'm here, he groaned, still mostly intact. You idiot, she snapped, but her voice cracked. He blinked up at her. Her golden eyes looked wild, panicked. You nearly died. I saved a lot of people, he whispered. You saved me. Those words hit harder than the blast. Their eyes locked. Her hand was still on his chest. He reached up, slowly, covered her hand with his. "I couldn't let anything happen to you." She froze. "I don't need protection. I'm a warrior." "I know. That's not why I did it." Silence. And then something broke in her expression, like a crack in the armor she wore inside. The unspoken truth beneath all their arguments, all their sharp words. She cared. Deeply. And it terrified her. "You're reckless," she said softly. "Stupid. Soft-hearted. But..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, smoke rising around them, sirens blaring, guards securing the plaza, there was nothing else in Jackson's world but her. And for once, she wasn't trying to look away. They didn't speak again that day. Jackson was rushed to the medical wing, treated for a mild concussion and second-degree burns. The doctor said he'd be fine with rest. But sleep never came easy after you've nearly been vaporized. Thesara didn't visit. Not immediately. Not where anyone could see. But later that night, when the palace was quiet and even the guards had retreated to their posts, Jackson found her standing on the observation deck, arms crossed, staring out at the starlit expanse of Centrolis Prime. She wasn't wearing her armor, just dark pants and a sleeveless black shirt. Her tattoos glimmered in the moonlight, marks of battles fought, of honors won, marks Jackson could now recognize, because he'd studied them, because he'd cared enough to learn. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked gently, stepping beside her. She didn't look at him, but she didn't walk away either. "You could have died." "I didn't," he said. "Thanks to your training, I knew how to aim the throw." She exhaled, slow and deliberate, but her hands were clenched at her sides. "You terrified me," she admitted. That made him stop. He'd never heard those words from her, not in any tone, and certainly not this one. Raw, uncertain, human. "I've seen soldiers gutted in front of me. I've had blades pressed to my throat. I've lost fleets, comrades, even family. But watching you..." She shook her head. "I didn't expect it to feel like that." He didn't speak, just let her breathe through the confession. "You risked your life. For me. I didn't think. I just moved. That's what scares me." She turned then, slowly, golden eyes locking onto his. There was no contempt in them now, no condescension, only fire. "You keep doing things that make me feel Jackson Rivers." He swallowed. "Is that a bad thing?" "It's inconvenient." He laughed, a soft, real sound. "I don't want to be inconvenient, but I don't want to be distant either." "You're not." That admission hung between them like gravity. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Thesara stepped forward, closer, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin. She reached up slowly, giving him time to pull away, and touched his cheek. "You didn't just save me today. You showed me something I forgot how to see." "What's that?" "Trust in someone who isn't afraid of me." Jackson reached up, resting his hand gently over hers. "I've never been afraid of you," he said. "You scared the hell out of me, sure. But I always knew you'd never hurt me." "Not really." Her breath caught. You infuriate me," she whispered. "You stumble through politics like a drunk lizard. You ask too many questions. You make me laugh at things I shouldn't. And yet, here we are. Here we are." There was silence. Then, without ceremony, she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't rushed, wasn't desperate. It was steady, deliberate, like a question and a declaration all in one. She tasted like starlight and steel, like warmth hiding behind walls. And when she pulled away, her voice was low. "Don't make me care for you and then throw yourself into another explosion." "No promises," he whispered, "but I'll try." She smiled. For real this time, it changed her entire face. "Then I suppose I'll stay." "Stay tonight?" "Stay here with you, with the Empire, for as long as I'm allowed to choose." He touched her markings, traced the constellation along her collarbone. "You always had a choice with me." She leaned her forehead against his. Then, I choose this. And for once, the stars above didn't feel so distant. The days that followed weren't filled with grand declarations or stolen kisses. They were filled with work. Real, relentless, political work. Jackson stopped fumbling in meetings. He still made mistakes. Plenty. But he asked sharper questions, took faster notes, and no longer shrank when the admirals pushed back. He read briefing reports twice, memorized names, learned. And Thesara was always there, sometimes across the room, arms folded, saying nothing, other times by his side, whispering the answer before he stumbled. She didn't take over, didn't correct him in front of others. She let him stand. But when no one was looking, she still sparred with him, still challenged him, still pulled him apart and put him back together, with words and questions and pointed looks that demanded more. "You're not a soldier," she told him once during a nighttime strategy review, "but you're starting to think like one." "I'm trying to think like an emperor." "Then stop trying," she replied. "Start deciding." It wasn't always easy. They argued, fought. Some nights ended in cold silence across the glass partition, but others ended in shared glances, in mutual respect, in fingers brushing as they passed datapads or walked too close in narrow halls. And little things started to change. She began drinking coffee. Not because she liked it, she hated the bitterness, but because she wanted to understand why it comforted him. He wore armor to one meeting, just for the effect, just to match her presence. He hated how it chafed, but the way she looked at him? Worth it. One morning, while reviewing the proposed budget for rebuilding Kepler 9, she glanced at him and said, "You're not who I thought you were." He paused. "Who did you think I was?" "A boy with oil-stained hands playing at power." "And now?" She tapped the datapad, thoughtful. "Now, you're a man holding power. He never asked for, but refusing to drop it." He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The look she gave him said enough. Later that evening, they sat side by side in the Imperial Garden. Her in relaxed armor, him barefoot in the grass, eating protein rations straight from the packet. "Why do you sit like that?" she asked. "Like what?" "Like you're waiting for the crown to fall off." He chuckled. "Because I still feel like the universe made a mistake." She turned to him. "It didn't. The throne didn't choose you because of your bloodline. It stayed yours because of your choices. I wouldn't be making them without you." "You'd find a way," she said. Then quieter. "But I'm glad you don't have to." And just like that, without needing to say it, they knew. This was more than survival, more than politics, more than forced proximity. They were growing into something neither had ever planned for, real partnership. And together, they were becoming unstoppable. And still, life, unpredictable as ever, found its way in. It began with quiet. Thesara, who had once trained until midnight and led with brutal clarity, started fading around the edges. She grew distant, not cold, but quiet. She skipped 2 morning briefings, deferred a security decision to her second-in-command, ate in silence, left meetings early. Jackson noticed. He always noticed her. He let it go at first. Maybe exhaustion, maybe battle fatigue. But when she canceled their evening strategy session with nothing but a 2-word message, "Not tonight," he couldn't ignore it anymore. He found her standing alone in the medical wing. No armor, no weapons, just her. A warrior, looking lost in a white room filled with too much silence. "Thesara," he said gently, "what's going on?" She didn't answer at first, just stared through the window at the empty stars beyond. Then she turned, and in her hand, a datapad. "This came from the Imperial Medscans," she said quietly. "I triple-checked. Then I had Axis triple-check." She handed it over. He took it slowly, scrolled. Hormonal surges, genetic compatibility markers, growth curve data. He blinked, then looked up. "You're pregnant." Her chin lifted slightly like she was bracing for an attack. "We didn't plan this," she said, "and biologically, it shouldn't even be possible. But it is." He said it, not as shock, but with a breathless kind of awe. They stood in the sterile quiet, the truth between them too loud to avoid. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Physically? Yes, it's early, stable." She hesitated, just long enough to sound like someone unused to doubt. "But I don't know what I'm doing. Jackson, I know war. I don't know this." Her voice didn't crack, but her eyes did. "I don't know how to be soft." He stepped forward. "You don't have to be soft. You just have to be you." He took her hand. "And you're not alone." She looked down at their joined hands like it was the first time she'd realized he was still holding hers. "I thought this would drive you away." "Yeah," it pulled me closer. A long silence. Then, "You'll stay?" she asked. "Thesara," he said, voice rough. "I was already yours. This just means I get to be theirs too." She looked up, and for the first time in days, her eyes weren't guarded. They were wide, wet, and full of something fierce and fragile all at once. "Then whatever happens," she whispered, "we face it as three." He nodded, pulled her close, held her there. "As three," he said, voice steady, heart thundering. And in the quiet of the medical wing, as the galaxy outside spun on oblivious, they stood together, not just as allies, not just as lovers, but as a family beginning. The rumors came like wind before a storm, whispers in the council halls, a nervous glance from a senior admiral, a request to review succession documents that should have been sealed. Jackson noticed them all, small cracks in the foundation of his empire. It all came to a head the night before the renewal summit. Thesara barged into the war room, her armor half-clasped, eyes blazing. "Someone tried to bribe my command staff," she said, "promised them titles and territory if they backed a different claimant." Jackson stood from the central console, throat tight. "It's starting." She nodded once. "A soft coup, a bloodless replacement. They want to install a pureblood, a safe puppet, and get rid of me. And me," she added grimly. "They want a throne without a challenge, without a fight." But they had underestimated something. They had fallen in love, not quietly, not secretly. In every room they entered, every joint decision they made, every time Thesara leaned in instead of away, they had built trust in full view of an empire. And the empire had noticed. The next morning, Jackson stood before the renewal summit, a sea of representatives, nobles, and planetary rulers. Not one of them trusted easily. Not one of them came without an agenda. He could feel their doubt like heat. Then, Thesara stepped forward, dressed in ceremonial armor, her hand resting firmly on his shoulder. "You all questioned his blood," she said, voice like thunder. "Questioned his strength, his right to rule. But he's earned more than a title." She looked out over the chamber. "He's earned me." Gasps rippled across the assembly. "And in earning me, he earned the loyalty of a warrior who once conquered 12 systems and defied empires." Jackson looked at her, stunned. Thesara wasn't one for declarations. She didn't speak unless it was to command, to correct, or to destroy. But now, she was standing for him, with him. She turned to face him fully, then dropped to one knee. The chamber went silent. "You do not need a crown to be an emperor," she said. "But I choose to follow you, as your soldier, as your consort, as the mother of your child." And with those words, the empire changed. The dawn over Centrolis Prime was unlike any Jackson had seen, not because the sky had changed, but because he had. The coronation that followed the summit was not for show. It was real, earned, not by blood, but by action, by choices, by the quiet revolution of a man who never wanted power, and a woman who once believed she didn't need love. They stood together, emperor and empress, partners, soon-to-be parents, on the balcony of the imperial palace, gazing down at a city that no longer looked at them with fear or suspicion, but with hope. "You still think the galaxy made a mistake?" Thesara asked, her voice soft beside him. Jackson exhaled, hand resting over hers where it lay on her belly. "No," he said. "I think maybe the galaxy finally got one thing right." She leaned into him slightly, her armor replaced by a simple dark gown, her silver markings shimmering under the sun. "I never imagined this," she said. "You, me, this child." "Neither did I," he replied. "But now I can't imagine anything else." They stood in silence for a while, letting the weight of the moment settle. Below, cheers rose from the plaza. Not orchestrated, not paid, just genuine. The Empire hadn't been restored, it had been reimagined. "What happens now?" Jackson asked, half to himself. Thesara turned to him, eyes steady as stars. "Now," she said, "we lead. We build. We raise a child who knows strength and kindness, who carries both our legacies and none of our regrets." He smiled. "That sounds like everything I ever wanted without knowing I did." She took his hand, squeezed once. "Look, let's give them an empire worth inheriting." And just like that, with no fanfare, no trumpets, just two people standing in the morning sun, a new chapter began. Not a fairy tale, not a war story, but a life, shared, strong, and finally, truly free.